main source of information today, but I do want to start off by saying that we are here in Chatham County, and the conversation is Chatham divided. All right, so we're finding in many places across the country as we continue to grow that we find socioeconomic inequities happening within our communities. And so we have decided here in Chatham County, North Carolina, that we will pay attention to this and come together and have a conversation very similarly to as we have done with the issue with the statue. So some of the information, as I just said earlier, hold on guys, you guys have to, I'm pre-setting up the show, so I'm live streaming for a moment here to make sure everything's go. We're going to start in about 2 minutes, 3 minutes. It's supposed to start right at 6 o'clock, but I'm getting a jump on this. So again, socioeconomic separation between East and West Chatham. I always found it rather rather funny that you know where I grew up, people didn't call portions of Raleigh North Raleigh, South Raleigh. It was just Raleigh. They didn't call it North Chatham and East Chatham, West Chatham. It was just Chatham. But as time has progressed and different communities pop up in different places, people distinguish, well, I live in North Raleigh or I don't, or I live in North Chatham or I don't. And these things in that conversation certainly do dictate that there are some socioeconomic separation, not just here, but in many different places throughout throughout the nation. So we are going to actually have a conversation about this. I think I'm live streaming. I think I am. But here, we'll switch over here. So we will, I'm going to switch me over.
Good evening, everybody. How are you? I want to thank you for so much for being here. My name is Bill Horner III, and for those of you I haven't had the chance to meet, I'm the publisher and editor of the Chatham News and Record newspaper. And on behalf of our partners, our Chatham would like to welcome you to the event tonight. You've got in your seats and scattered throughout the chairs, there's information about our panelists tonight. I'll introduce them in just a minute. Some statistical information about our topic tonight, which is socioeconomic inequality. And there's some copies of the newspaper, this week's paper. If you didn't get one, there's some in the back. We do have food, so this is going to be kind of an informal process tonight. Feel free to get up, and as the panelists are talking, we're answering questions, to help yourself to some food and water. We are looking to be finished by 8 o'clock or before tonight, so just want to again thank you all for being here. To get things started, I want to introduce you to a couple of folks that we've been working with from our Chatham. Eric Ferkenhoff, who is a lecturer and journalism professor at the School of Media Journalism at UNC Chapel Hill, and Alexis Austin, who is a just graduated senior from UNC, just graduated this weekend. So this community conversation was actually the idea of the Our Chatham people. We have been partnering with Our Chatham since my partners and I acquired the Chatham News and the Chatham Record back in November. And to tell you a little bit more about Our Chatham and about kind of the goal for these One Chatham events, I'd like to bring up Eric Ferkenhoff.
He's much taller than I am. I'm Eric Ferkenhoff. I'm the editor of Our Chatham. We started actually about a year ago trying to reach out to the community and flip the editorial model on its head. It's very easy to be an editor and dream up story ideas and send out reporters to cover it. Our idea was to engage the community, get questions from them, get input from the community, and then come up with our editorial plan accordingly. So we really ramped up in February. I think some of you have been hit with our emails. We're looking for more signups, etc. But the real thing that we're looking for is questions from you all. I see Chase from Northwood High School in attendance. Thank you for being here. I see a lot of people that we know and that have participated before. So we just want your input so we can get the word back out to you about issues that matter to you. Thank you. Anything you want to say?
No, you said it.
Okay.
He said it all.
All right, thank you guys very much for the work that you do. So you're going to see Alexis tonight as we start, and you have questions. If you'll just kind of raise your hand if you have a question for the panelists. Alexis is going to have a portable microphone, and she will get to you with the microphone. So just watch for her. So thank you guys for being here. I want to do a couple of other pieces of recognition. First of all, Aaron Hall from Taj Talk and WCHL Radio. Aaron is live streaming the event tonight. Aaron, if you'll wave your hand, thanks for being here. I want to thank our sound guy, Billy Freeman. Billy is an instructor at CCCC and has worked with me for a lot of events in the past. I want to thank them. Our food tonight was provided by Angelina's Kitchen and Oasis Market in Siler City and Gary Thomas Farm. So please, again, help yourself with all that. I want to now introduce our panelists and thank them again for being here. These are very, very busy folks. And as we start, I want to tell you that we're not experts on this topic of socioeconomic inequality. There's a lot of brain power here and some 5 very, very smart folks. But we may not have all the answers, and that's kind of what we're doing tonight. The purpose of tonight is to really have a discussion about this topic, maybe come away with some action points and get the community, get the conversation going about the topic in Chatham County. So what I'll do is I'll introduce the panelists, and then we'll get started. And with the first question, I'll have them tell a little bit about themselves. So starting from your left is Alyssa Bird, who's the president of the Chatham County Economic Development Corporation. Paul Quadras is next. Paul is an investigative reporter and author and a professor at UNC. Susan Levy is part of the Chatham County Affordable Housing Commission, and glad to have her. And Tammy Schwerin from Abundance NC. And Tammy's got some fans. And Stephanie Watkins Cruz, who is a policy analyst for Chatham County. So again, thank you for being here. So we will start with this. I'm going to ask the panelists each to formally introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their role in the community, and then talk about what they hope to accomplish with this communication, with this conversation tonight. And Alyssa, we'll start with you.
Sure. Okay, let's see. Make sure you guys can hear me. My name's Alyssa Bird. I'm with Chatham County Economic Development Corporation. I have been with the organization since 2011, so I've seen a lot of change in Chatham County. This evening, I hope to leave everyone really positive and inspired about all of the collaborative efforts that are going on in this county and the hard work that's being done by a lot of groups and elected bodies to improve our community.
My name is Paul Quadras. Oh, there we go. And I wear many hats. Let's see, I'm a reporter, I'm a writer. I moved here to Chatham County in 1999 to write about the emerging Latino community, specifically in Siler City, and wrote a book about that experience. And I'm a soccer coach at Jordan Matthews High School in Siler City, and this is my 18th season. And let's see, what else have I done? Oh, I built a park in Siler City. That was a project. And I've sent probably hundreds of kids on to higher education through the Scholars Latino Initiative, which is a mentoring program. Is still doing mentoring, but also working on next leadership state. That's it. Oh, what do I want to get out of the meeting? Let's see. For all of us, I think coming out of this being better informed. So I think all of us realize that there is, we need more information in Chatham. We definitely need to understand the issues that are facing us for the future. I think part of that.
there are several people that could potentially address the solution. From a community level, when I mean community, I oftentimes include the government, I include the businesses, I include the community groups, neighborhoods, nonprofits, because I think it's a holistic and healthier way to view the community. But I recognize that communities don't often necessarily consider their community to be all of those people. So at the true people-to-people level, I think Chatham exhibits that in a way by kind of sharing resources. There's a lot of resources that are shared here by word of mouth, and I think in essence that's advocacy. I think both role to play in advocacy, and then you get into kind of the private capital side of businesses, and then you get to government, the public side. And I think the government always has a role to serve their community, their residents. We have a responsibility to not only guard your tax dollars as responsibly as we can, and I know this sounds cliche, like I read it off the job description, but it's true. We have to be responsible, and part of that means being attentive to needs. And I think at every single level, that means that those needs need to be vocalized, but also that recognizing that we can make decisions that leverage our resources with other resources. But I don't think there's one sort of linear path of this institution is going to carry this, because then you get into sustainability issues, right? So I can imagine if when you were developing your co-op, all those people that sat on their front porches, that's a lot of different resources from a variety of ways, maybe social and financial. Naturally, you talk about natural resources that can be leveraged, but there's also a capital perspective that might come from private entities as well. So I think there's a shared responsibility, and it's just about identifying points at which that can happen. So we want affordable housing. What are ways that we can fund that? And I think there are a lot of answers to that. So I don't think I got even half of your question, but just an idea there.
Are we allowed to ask the audience questions? So I think a lot of these systems are put together with scarcity and fear, but we have Karen Howard from the commissioners, and we have Pam Baldwin here. What kind of things can we do as policy makers about raising minimum wage as a county, or something we do to the state and federal? We obviously can't. Has raised its own minimum wage in various communities. But in terms of implementing policy that Roberson County is doing, I think we have the authority to do that. That is policies but I do think that as a county, as a community, when we insist on certain things, so we can do those kind of changes. So we don't tolerate a salary that's subpar, that's that doesn't afford a living income. Businesses will have to step up, and I think we've seen that in other places. California is an extreme example, but if you want employees, you do have to step up the pay. So those are the kind of pressures that come from outside, and the town is doing it too. I don't know what that is. But I do do think there are opportunities for us to collaborate and have conversations with business about the kind of pay scales they have. And certainly, I think when the county is talking about our incentive policies, those kind of things, that's opportunities for us to say, if you want to do business in Chatham, the cost of business may not be your cheapest bet, but it could still be your best bet because of the quality of the employees, because of the quality of the company, because of the lifestyle and everything that's going on. I don't think they're really
That was my first thought is county actually has a really thoughtful incentive policy for our taxes. It's a place-based system that weighs a lot of different factors. One of the biggest factors is the quality of the job. So looking at the average wages and how they compare within the county and within the state. And, regarding an hire, if they achieve higher. So if we hold ourselves very true to that policy and make sure that we are looking at the investment, are they redeveloping the property? Are they going in a strategic place? How many jobs are they creating? Are they paying for 50 to 60% of the healthcare? So one of the great things about systems is that they can adapt and change as the community changes. And I think that's, if we're all working together, which there actually is a lot of interlocal collaboration between our government, our municipalities here, as well as the surrounding municipalities, we can adopt best practices and operating in a vacuum here, making sure that we're serving our community. And another, education is another example. The Chatham Promise is a new program that the Chatham County Commissioners approved in December, is that right? Which provides 2 years of tuition to qualifying Chatham County. Yeah, 2 years of tuition to Chatham County high school students to go to Central Carolina Community College. I mean, what better way to keep people here? And, I mentioned not just inequality, but inequity. This is leveling the playing field and giving people an opportunity to have access to something they didn't have before. So, yeah, systems are meant to adapt and evolve. And as long as we're approaching things with empathy towards all the other members of our community and, Stephanie named all the different types of communities that we have, and there are many more, native language speakers or not, as long as we're approaching things with empathy and understanding, I think we can accomplish a lot.
I think at the same time, there are parts of our county that people are desperate for the evidence and the economic that's motivated leaders and other people to seek out industry and provide popular which I think is probably going to be our voice. The plan is, I think they're going to ratchet up to 50. So, and that's not including the other jobs that they're creating, the drivers, more growers and growers, hatchery and so forth. And when I first got here, a line worker in the poultry plant was $6,000 an hour. So, what is a line worker and how they're so, I think that we can look at these things, and I think that we have to have an understanding of the needs of people that want to work, that communities that need jobs, and not just looking at Silent City over the past few years, most recently the past 10 years, in which it was a town that was essentially bankrupt. So that's one way, right? That, I think the other thing is engagement from
mentioned advocacy. When I think about affordable housing and how we can potentially solve that issue, it really does require everybody, not just government, because at the federal and state level, there's really nothing left to support affordable housing, so it all really has to come pretty much locally. And to be completely honest, you can't really produce affordable housing without subsidy, which means there has to be some taxpayer dollars from somewhere to support affordable housing, especially if you want to reach the people at the lowest level who have the greatest need. The market simply won't take care of it. And I think unless everybody kind of comes together and coalesces around that need and is willing to, for example, vote for an affordable housing bond. That happened recently in Chapel Hill. There was a $10 million bond approved that's going to create hundreds and hundreds of affordable housing units. And of course, Chapel Hill is bigger than here in Chatham County, but I think it's something that we need to consider and think about paying potentially a little higher taxes in order to benefit the larger population, which is going to benefit all of us. I think, Paul really highlighted some of the issues around affordable housing. If we have people who don't have a safe, decent place to live, it does down the line cause a whole lot more expenses, both in terms of healthcare and education, and employers being able to find employees who live close to where they work. So there's just a whole lot of issues that tumble out of the lack of affordable housing that end up costing us money. So I think we can all take responsibility. I'm speaking about affordable housing because that's what I know, but I think we all have to understand that it's an issue that impacts all of us, and we have to be willing to make potentially some small sacrifices to achieve it.
What is the definition of affordable housing, if I could just ask that? Because,
Yeah.
I think I've heard it's $200,000 and that's not affordable. What is
Yeah. So the real definition of affordable housing is not paying more than 30% of your income for your housing. And the lower you go, the more that 30% impacts you. So if you're very low income, 30% of your income, paying that for housing doesn't leave very much. And if you're paying more than 30% of your income, you really have basically nothing left over for all of your basic needs. But that's the official definition. In terms of government programs and who can benefit from what's funded through government programs, affordable housing that's funded with government funds, you have to earn 80% of the area median income or below to qualify for most programs that get any government money. But there's a whole area of affordable housing that's sort of the 80 to 120% of area median income that's called workforce housing, which is also a huge need. But clearly the lower you go, the greater the need.
And if I could provide some context to Susan's number, so one person earning 80% of the area median income in Chatham County is earning around $45,000. Someone earning 100% of the area median income is making around $56,400. This is one person. If you begin to stretch that out into a multi-person household, so let's say three people earning a three-person household, earning 50% of the area median income is making $36,250. That's as a household. So that essentially means that of the $36,250. There's nothing that the market is really producing that kind of meets that threshold, which is where intervention comes in. And for context, very low income is 30% and below. For one person, that's $16,920. For three people, for a three-person household, that's a little over $21,000, almost at $22,000. So you see that large range, and you all know from living here or working here, there's no $300 apartments. I wish, because I would definitely try and live there myself. So, for context.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm Pamela Baldwin, and Tammy had asked a question in reference to the town of Pittsboro, and I'm Commissioner, Town of Pittsboro, and thank you, Tammy, for that. But basically, in terms of the wages, the town of Pittsboro actually does not have any control of that. However, what I think we need to do is to be as advocates and work with the schools system, the community college, in trying to prepare our students in reference to possible blue-collar jobs as well as white-collar. When I say that, a blue-collar jobs such as electronics engineers, those are blue-collar jobs, and they actually teach that at CCCC. And also, in terms of course, college, 4-year degrees. So we need to prepare and work with our school system to make sure that those things are taken care of so that the students here will be prepared to come back for these possible jobs, as well as work with the development community, those who are bringing industry in, to find out what type of jobs they are anticipating bringing, prepare those particular students for those jobs so that basically when they get out of school, they can have those positions. Or if they come here to CCCC, they can be prepared to come back there. And welders, that's also blue collar. So those are good paying positions. But we as a community, we have to work together to see if we can accomplish things like that. It can't be one side against the other side. We as a community have to work together to achieve those and share different ideas and how we can obtain or meet those particular ideas. So and thank you again for asking me to stand up and speak on that.
I'm going to jump up. I'm Jeff Gannon. Excuse me, I am the lead instructor in the construction program here at CCCC. So thank you, Ms. Baldwin, for that shout out. Thank you to the Board of Commissioners for this Chatham Promise. That is an awesome program. Next year we're going to start seeing our first cohort of students coming through. So this is a huge. Oh, okay. All right. So this is a huge equalizer in terms of giving people a pathway to a profession where you can go out there and you can make a really awesome living without accruing any student loan debt. And so this is absolutely a great opportunity for students. Just as a testament, students that have been through the program last year and are already out there working are making $35 an hour. Talked to a student yesterday, he's making on some jobs $60 an hour. So these are folks with an associate's degree, and next year they're going to be folks that didn't even have to pay for that associate's degree. So awesome shout out to our commissioners and the county for setting that up. But integral to this is also these components of the history of our county. It is crucial that we make sure that all of our communities know about these programs and are taking advantage of these programs, are finding transportation to these programs, because that is where folks are I suspect that's where we're gonna see folks fall through the cracks and these inequities continue. So even though we have these opportunities, it has to be more than, just to call it for what it is, white folk talking to white folk and making sure their kids get these opportunities. It needs to be, Latino folks from Siler City, African American folks from South Chatham, so we need to be sure that we are stepping outside of our comfort zones and talking to people that do not necessarily look like we do, but are our neighbors and are also here in this county, and making sure that their kids also take advantage of these opportunities. So I just wanted to share that.
I think we had someone else.
Good evening. It's interesting when you were talking about affordable house care. I worked at Sealy Manufacturing Company. All of a sudden I had an accident. The girl said, if you go to middle school, you learn math. And I wasn't the greatest thing in math, but you learn what you make per hour and things of that nature. Keep that in mind, $4 an hour. That was in the 70s. Let me take you through 96. I was working at Rosie's, part-time, and then I looked up, I went to community college here, general office technology. Now, mind you, I had worked in the state of Connecticut, for the state coroner there, pay was great. I get back here in Chatham County. I got a job at basic machinery after the fact in '96, and they paid me $5 an hour. The engineers told me that. I don't know what's under my motor of my car, but I work with the engineers. I thought it was gonna be interesting. One day they said, Human Resources, we trying to help you, touching me. I said, helping who, Cheryl? I said, me and the Hispanics is the one of the low, I was only black there. Me and the Hispanics are the lowest paid person there. I told my boss, I was signed a paper giving you permission to look at my records. $5, I made more than that. You know, working part-time, overtime at Rosie's. Now, I could graduate at community in the general office, I know, but yet there was another flick chick. She barely graduated out of high school. Asked her to go and take such and such course. She have a hissy fit, okay? My husband told me, take the job. I'm here. I didn't struggle. I went. This is what made me outspoken, because what is $300 cleared off your paycheck? Okay, and I had a child. You talking about apartments. My daughters went to apartment in Solid City, Walnut Cove, whatever it is. Living together, all of a sudden the rent jumped up. You pay $400, you pay $800. They said no. They went to Brookwood. You talking about the rent? It's cheaper at Brookwood, okay? Nobody's got $800 and thousands of dollars of rent, because the fact, the jobs out here are not paying you. How many times have I had in my life being back in Chatham County? And I growed up in Chatham County. I'm not from somewhere else, I'm here. How many times I sat downtown in Solid City and helped a white young lady fill out the application? Who got the job? Racism, okay? I saw it all my growing up years where I worked, but I didn't back down. I still see it out here. Take a ratio, how many blacks and whoever is got the skills, why are they working in Orange County, Memorial Hospital and all around? Tell me that. There's Chatham Hospital here, but they working in Memorial Hospital, okay? See, you can throw all the numbers out here. I've been here all my life. Then another factor, you're talking about Snipes Trailer Park, it was never Hispanic. There was blacks that lived there. There was whites that lived there. Okay, look in the neighborhoods, not just black, white, pink, green, how are they keeping their neighborhood? I've never seen so much trash, garbage. You see what I'm saying? This is why your rent is so compelling high. I lived in an apartment when we left, it was so compelling clean. They can paint the walls if they want to. But we didn't leave trash hanging around here and there. Look all around, not just Solid City. It's insulting when you say Pittsburgh, because I could ride around Pittsburgh and see things that's not a court, okay? But when Lowe's Pittsburgh wanted to come down in Solid City, you talking about bringing the business in Solid City, how many people of age kills it? That's why Lowe's is in Pittsburgh today. They wanted to kill Walmart, but the very one that killed Walmart, you'll see them prancing in there for whoever they may be. Every time they try to get something, there's always somebody trying to kill it, okay? Trying to kill it. Art Center is wonderful, but it don't give what? Jobs. Most of the factory companies they had in those periods of years, they're not there no more. None is coming in. We are fortunate to have the poultry plant. But there's people that's got skills, they don't want to be standing there working with meat all day long in a poultry plant. Maybe that's where until you work there, then you'll know what it's like. I've had that experience, okay? I don't know what the experience is working at. I hope it's a cleaner place than the experiences I've had, okay? Affordable housing has to match your salary. If it's gonna take all you got on that paycheck, and now it's every 2 weeks, What do the people have when they got children? You know, I want you to take a trip over to Brookwood Apartments in the dead of February, December, when it's cold. How many got heat? And you so concerned about children? How many got heat? Okay? One or two here and there. And they got seniors living over there. I got a problem with when I was going to school, my parents provided me pencil and paper. I provided my children the same thing. Why do I need to be concerned? They want me to buy, I said, I'll buy clinics for my children. What about the other 29 kids in here? What about their parents? Okay? We're so complacent, throw out words, but we're not looking at the facts of truth. Okay? We're split, yes. I don't go to east side and west side no more because I solved the problem, but I still vote. Okay? I still vote. But we need to be complacently think about why these private family businesses, why factories are so low pay. And you'll be amazed how many bright and smart and intelligent and educated people is in these places. But you, whoever you are in leadership, won't give them the time of day. This is why Orange County, Durham, and all that is getting these people. Because I listen to where people working at Raleigh, going that distance when they could be here. Okay? So what is affordable housing? If you're making $10 or $15 an hour and up, you probably can afford that $800 a month rent. Not counting your light bill and the technology in your home and whatever. I don't have a computer. That's wasted money to me when I can come down here to the library. Okay? You talking about less seniors in Chatham County, Solid City? Wrong. More than you can imagine. Where are you getting your numbers? It's more than you can imagine. You see, they got 70s, 80s, and 90s living, almost 100 living in Solid City.
I'm going to ask Alyssa a question. She brings up this issue about wages, specifically for you as in the EDC, and then I know, Elizabeth, you've got a question. When you think about employers, there's a need for the employer to make a profit, to invest in the company, to expand, to bring more jobs, but there's also responsibility to the wage earners. So when you're thinking about your conversations with business and industry, what's the thought process now in trying to have this balance between giving wage earners what they need to have a living wage for Chatham County and the employers need to make a profit?
Yeah, so right now it's highly competitive for the labor force. We have under 4% unemployment in North Carolina, which is next to full employment. So it's very challenging for employers. I guess if you use a housing metaphor, it's a buyer's market or a seller's market. If they're selling their skills, it's a seller's market. So they have a lot of competitiveness right now for choosing the jobs that they want because businesses need workers. I wrote down a note and I can't read my handwriting.
Okay, we've got a question from Elizabeth.
You. Elizabeth Colbrecken with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Central Carolina. I apologize. I want to just backtrack briefly with the work that we're talking about with the young people. That is something dear to my heart with CCCC. A recent study that I read was talking about housing insecurity among college students, especially community college students. I believe it was in between 36 and 40% of college students experiencing difficulty with housing, food insecurity. You know, when we're talking about building up this community, putting back workers into this community, how are we supporting those young people at this point in time? And I'd like to just ask that and for ways to explore that as an option.
Does anyone want to take a stab at it, or is it on me?
Go for it.
Oh, all right. I'm from rural North Carolina. I didn't move back to my hometown after college. We definitely have to help foster an environment here for young people to continue our growth. So someone told me all you need for millennials is music, good food, and beer, and I thought, yeah, but part of that is housing. Housing, it really does. It comes back to an opportunity for a good, well-paying job and housing. So Susan and I were talking before the event, and she mentioned she worked for Orange Habitat for 26 years. So for 26 years, she's commuted out of Chatham County. That's her network. And a lot of people in Chatham County are like that, where they are spending their time outside of this county, they're spending their money outside of this county, they're developing their community elsewhere. I mean, we've got to have an opportunity so you all can come back here and spend your social capital in our community, making a difference. So, and I think young people, young millennials, care about that. So that's part of the broader opportunities we can help.
Yeah, and I think we don't have a lot of housing options at all for millennials, for single individuals or couples. When the previous research that was done showed that there's just a real dearth of one-bedroom rentals available. It's just a huge gap. And so developing that kind of housing for young people who want to stay here, and also for seniors who want to age here and can't keep up a larger home, it's a missing piece of the puzzle here in Chatham County, because we have so many single-family homes and not very many duplexes, triplexes, quadruplexes, that kind of housing that could house folks who need to rent something that's affordable and that's much smaller than what we can offer, because it costs more if you've got a larger apartment, and there just aren't the units. We don't have the supply, and that's one of the things we're hoping to address.
I think also when we're thinking of millennials and other young people, that our leaders need to think about creating social magnets for them to come and be entertained and to have an experience, and that goes into building nice parks, building soccer fields, and putting a plug in for that, building spaces for music, building spaces for people to congregate and to have a good time, because that's what young people want to do, and that's what makes a place attractive. And we're beginning to do that a little bit. That's tied into some of the recent development. And if you go to some of those recent places, you're going to see younger people there. And but that definitely goes to a question of leadership and vision on the part of our leaders in terms of creating these spaces and seeing opportunity to create signature places for people to come and congregate, and then to spend their money and to have a good place and to have amenities that they want to enjoy in a place that they want to live in. So, I mean, I'm going to point out the historic courthouse, which of course burned several years ago and then was recreated into essentially a museum, and now it stands there. And sometimes it's used for some court cases and some town meetings. That was an opportunity to make it into something else, right? Mm-hmm. To make it into a music venue, to make it into an attraction, make it into to see these things. And to see opportunity within them to create a community that is livable, that is nice, that people want to go to, and that will bring in revenue. But mostly will just keep people here because it's a beautiful and a nice place to live. And the same thing goes out west in Siler City and in other communities like Bennett and Bon Lee, and taking advantage of what they can offer in terms of things that they can offer young people as well. So all those things, I think, are essential to keep young folks here and working here. Yes, creating jobs so people can work here. But if that's not going to be the case in the next 20 years, then at least creating an environment, a community where people do want to live.
Also, I'm hearing we have food insecurity and heat insecurity, as you were just discussing. And I don't know how to solve this, but we have enough food in this county for everybody. So it's not like we don't have food. How do we get the food to, what's the creative solution so that no one has to go hungry? Because, as you probably have read, we waste probably 50% of our food via just, in our kitchens or on the field or in the grocery store waste. And it does, we don't need to have starving people in Chatham County. I don't know how to solve that one.
So I'll say that as a community, we have to consider all members of the community. We can't go back to whether we think they're pulling their own weight. But what I think it was in Elizabeth, I think your question was really going to, we have a community of kids growing up in our public school system, and we have a system in place for those children who do not have food security. So we have lunch programs, and we have something to support them. And at the school level, we know who has housing insecurity, so there's something to address it. And then once they get into the community college system, there's no more net, which I had not thought of until you said that now. But those are the same children that were hungry at home in 12th grade. Why would they not have that challenge in the community college? And that's certainly something I think we need to be thinking about when we're having the conversation with community colleges and high schools about how we continue that safety net for them so that they can stick with school and not have to leave and go work, and so that they're not making a long-term plan based on some short-term challenges. So thank you for bringing that up. And then I think the other part is we do have enough food. We have enough of everything. I think that what ends up happening is the opportunity and the access is concentrated in specific areas, and we're not necessarily as a community doing a good job of spreading that out. And I think that if we did map the county in terms of resources, whatever they may be, we would find that there's a lot of opportunity to develop some collaborations, and farmers don't want waste any more than we want families going hungry. And there's probably something that we could do as a community to address it. And then there was a third thing, but I forgot it.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
My name's Lita Hartman. I've lived here for 20 years. One thing I worry about is I see Chatham County as a real cross-section of the country. We're purple politically. We've got all kinds of people, all kinds of industries. But I really worry about the polarization that's in this county. And underneath all the policy discussions and the how-tos and what we can do is like a broader feeling of how can we take care of each other better? Because I suspect there are people who commute to Orange County from Briar Chapel who have never been to Bonley, have never talked to a traditional farmer, those retired people in Goldston. And it's true that people, what Tammy said about people being, taking care of each other within their communities, that makes up for not having money in a lot of ways, but it's in its own silo versus really having like a community-wide effort that really reaches throughout the county. And my question is, how do we do that? How do we get out of our comfort zone? And I don't know if there's an answer to it, but I think the question is worth bringing up.
I'm going to borrow a analogy from Roberta Fox, who is a former assistant planner for the city of Raleigh. How many of you have a kid, a child? All right, how many of you have more than one child? Okay, so I have 2 kids. When I was expecting the second one, we got the first one involved in everything. We started talking to him about what's going to happen. You've got a baby sister. You're going to help us pick out some clothes, help us get her crib ready. This is going to be so much fun. We worked on that transition. I think that that's something we can apply to our community. We can work on these transitions and creating empathy so we can manage this change better within our community. So yeah, I just want to go back to like collaborating and building empathy between different communities that I think will really help create success.
I think I think you're touching on, one of our underlying issues, Lita, which is the division that exists. And it's a very large county, and we have division like in everything, even geographically, like where we live and our sensibilities with that. So we have an ag center here in Pittsburgh, but the ag heart is out west, but the center is here, right? But those were decisions that were made, and I often think that people in West Chatham, feel neglected and without a voice, and yet it also contains our largest municipality, and is among the most diverse parts of our county, and it seems almost neglected on a county basis. And I think Lita's right. Just try and get anybody from Northeast Chatham to drive to Bonnley or Siler City or Bennett. Or think about this: if you live in Pittsburgh and you don't feel well, do you drive west to Chatham Hospital, or do you drive north to UNC Memorial? They're both UNC hospitals. And that's I know that the hospital, Chatham Hospital, struggles with trying to get people on this side of the county to use its services. And, if you have certain things, you don't have to wait the way you do in Chapel Hill. And it's just a huge advantage. But people don't have this mindset of going west. They want to go north. They want to go east. And it's such a huge magnet. But what it also does, I know, Lita, you're eager to say more, but, these 15 miles or 17 miles that separate us, might as well be 700 miles in many cases. I've seen organizations that have tried to be county-wide, and yet if it's in the east, it's always going to kind of, have, its central gravity there. Or if it's in the west, it's going to be out there. It's so difficult to have this sort of unified county. And that expresses itself in all different kinds of ways, and it certainly expresses itself in terms of poverty and access to resources. Yes?
Describe a discussion about charter schools versus somebody going to jail. Discussion. I'll describe it. Recently, he's my husband. I like him. So, but we talk about these things a lot.
Trouble.
I know. My apologies in advance. We recently had a discussion with a lovely young lady who was pretty new to Chatham. I think she'd been here maybe a year and a half or so. Very open-minded, lovely person. Lived in the middle of the county, rurally. And her kids, geographically, would have gone to Jordan Matthews. But her friends, her liberal friends, were all telling her, oh, no, you don't want to send your kid to that school. Well, why? Because it's a school that has primarily kids of color. And Jordan Matthews is a lovely school, good vibes. If I look at it and I think, oh, is there hope for future in terms of racial reconciliation and people of three colors getting along, I think of JM, with its good vibe. But the stereotype is the opposite. I was like, oh, don't put your kid there, and there's so much white flight. Even the schools, which should be a laboratory for us getting out of our comfort zone and getting along and being educated about all different kinds of people, are sometimes serving a different purpose. So it's kind of compounding these silos that we need to try to break through. Just wanted to make that point because everybody goes to school. Thanks.
Paul, before you answer, another complicating factor is the fact that Chatham County, I believe, has the highest percentage of residents who leave the county to work in the entire state. So you have folks who are not a part of the Chatham County tribe because they don't work here.
Mm-hmm. That's a very old issue, going back decades in terms of the school system allowing transfers from Silk Hope to parents sending their kids to Chatham Central instead of Jordan Matthews. And then the later creation of school choice, which, of course, divided the student body even more. So, and that's something that's, not unique to Chatham, but rather is a statewide issue in terms of choice and segregation or resegregation of our schools. But it is these sort of perceptions that we have between East and West that have hardened, and so that when newcomers come in, they're fed the same stereotypes and lies. Maybe I'll say that, and it influences people.
Sure, Karen.
So I'm one of the newcomers. I live in Northeast Chatham, and I knew nothing about, and I was on the school board for years. I knew nothing about this divide, and I had people come to board meetings and say, "You don't like us because we live in the West and our schools are in the West," and I'm like, "What is the divide? What are you talking about? I don't have anything against anybody." And my kids and I would go and hang out in Siler City. I didn't know it was West. I just knew it was up 64 and it was halfway to Ashboro and whatever, and it felt really far away. But then I realized it wasn't. It goes both ways. No, I have no friends from the West who've ever come to North Chatham to do anything. So if I want to see them, I go West. There's a complete misunderstanding of who lives in the East. And just as in the Northeast, in the eastern part, there's a complete misunderstanding of what Chatham County is. First of all, a lot of them didn't know they lived in Chatham County, and I had to tell them that Governor's Club is in Chatham County. But it didn't mean anything. So if you come from other parts of the United States, the county lines don't mean anything. And they certainly don't mean what they mean here. And so, trying to kind of re-educate your newcomers is a lot easier than when people get here telling them there's a divide and you're on this side and the rest of the people are on that side. That was a terrible introduction. Had I not already made friends in other parts of the county, had I not ventured out and decided that we were going to do staycations and go to inns around the county for our summer holidays, I would not have ever ventured out because there was a divide and I was on this side and the real Chathamites were on the other side. And so I think it's going to have to be both sides. The East is not going to suddenly come rushing over into the West and say, hey, we want to be your friends. There has to be some outreach that there's stuff to see. There's a beautiful, I'll tell you, campaigning is horrible, but you see some of the most beautiful parts of this country, I'm sure. Driving into Silk Hope and Bondley. And no one's ever going to know that there's a reason to go if we just focus on the divide. If we just, if we're beating this horse, nobody's going to get on its back. And so I think there is a lot of opportunity to say there are things happening in the West. Advertise them in the Northeast. In fact, there are things happening in Siler City and people so I have 2 trailer parks near me. Both Hispanic communities in those trailer parks didn't get any advertising about them. So it's not, the divide is huge. Black people in the Northeast don't know black people in the other parts of the county, and there are black people in the Northeast. So it's just, as a county, we have to collectively do a better job. There's a divide because we create it and we allow it to subsist.
And I agree with all that, but when we see resources being allocated, and this is the most obvious thing, we're going to see a new high school built in the Northeast. You look at Chatham, let me finish. Chatham Central, Jordan Matthews, these are schools that are more than 60 years old. As bricks and mortar, they're falling apart. In terms of the technology that they can provide their students, it's inadequate. So, in terms of resources, yes, the population is growing in the Northeast. The population is also growing in Siler City. Like I said, that's our largest municipality. But that high school is getting old. And we don't hear any talk about building something else out there. And that's an issue that's going to rise. I'm just being a conduit here and telling you what people are thinking and saying about that. And that needs to happen. And then it needs to be spoken by our leaders. Because I'm hearing people say that, but then I also got to hear our leaders say that as well.
Got a question in the back. question in the back.
Yeah. So it sounds like there's a lot of ideas and not as many solutions to those ideas, which is not a bad thing. It's hard to just solve. But as Tammy was saying, we have farmers. We can farm. We can provide food. Susan, you spent time with Habitat. We can build. We have a lot of people. We can build a lot of homes. But to the extent of what Alyssa was saying, and several others in here, I've noticed that when you're searching for empathy and you need solutions, you need a way to get a message across to people. When you speak of people in numbers and percentages, I think we know how that goes historically. You can't make a person a number. So you have to be able to do something to make people see, to really feel. Now, as a photographer and a climber, I spend all of my time back, observing, learning, patiently waiting for the right moment, and then I approach it. And with that specifically, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the photographer Platon. A while ago, he did some work in a little place called Burma. There were some war crimes that occurred there, and he made sure to get the stories out, but through a visual medium, photography. Part of what I'd essentially propose to this is we have this vast county, and we have no idea what a west and east and north and south. I can't even tell you what that looks like. I spend a lot of time driving around back roads. I've probably covered 50 miles of roads in the last 2 years, just driving, looking for stuff. But those are just houses and buildings, but you need people. You need to see the people that are hurt, that are happy, that are sad, that are glad. You need to see all those emotions, and you need to capture them, and you need to show them to the rest of the residents. Because if you can give people something to look at, to see like, this is the problem, or this is what's really good, then we have something to work towards and base ourselves off of, to set a goal, to get to it. So something of that nature, I think it would be effective. At least a good starting point is to give a face to the cause. And to that end of not having a divided Chatham, but having a united Chatham. So that's...
Another question over here.
My name is Christina Fisher, and I own a business in Siler City, Zone Fitness and Tan. Okay, sorry. And live in Silcoat. Jackie's my other half. She also owns a small business. And to anybody in county government, I think you're in county government, and anybody else, maybe town government, it might apply as well. I called the county and I asked a question about tiny homes, and the idea came up about, well, the gap with 1 bedroom, 1 bath homes. So what we do have in Western Chatham County is land, and we have a lot of it. And to my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the county has a tiny home plan or ordinance. Because when I called them to talk about this, I got 3 bedroom, 2 bath. How many can I put on 10 acres, 20 acres, 30 acres? We were not talking the same language. So there is a perfect example of a housing problem. We have vast amount of land, especially in the western part of the county, and the county doesn't have an ordinance to support anyone who may want to partner with other folks to make it happen. And to publicize it, make it okay with all the surrounding farmers. What are they doing? They're building a commune. I can hear it already. But if the county has a plan, presents it, publicize it, gets buy-in to it, and when you talk affordable housing, go and Google what types of housing you could live in I mean, I've watched all the shows, I've Googled everything. There's so many cool things out there. And I'm talking cheap, cool, you know, invite your friends over, have a fire in the fire pit places. But the county doesn't have anything like that yet. Yesterday. I mean, come on already. Yeah.
Yes.
It's quite old, so, and that we will be able to incorporate kind of that concept, which is a relatively new thing.
So here's let me just give you some input. Tiny house, we all have seen HGTV, and we've all seen how many dollars per square foot these things cost, and they're way too expensive. There's a lot of other opportunities, and I encourage to be broadly flexible in how it's heated, cooled, communal well concept, those kind of things, to just be broadly flexible, because if you can, there's more people who could be able to deliver something like that and get closer to the $300 a month. It's possible. It is possible. But you've got to broaden your mind in what a house is. And I think the resources are already here. They are already here. We just need the county to be clear on what we can and can't do, and to make it broad as opposed to narrow. You know.
Multi-year project, but there will be opportunity for
So,
Okay.
and I also want to add to that.
Thank you.
Our awesome Chatham Habitat has a small house that they, I think, recently dedicated in Siler City. And you're absolutely right. What I think we're seeing is that there are a lot of best practices that have taken root in a lot of other places, and we are kind of at this tipping point in which that is exactly the type of flexibility that we need to have, and perfect timing, but also could have been yesterday. Perfect timing in which we have a process that we're looking at that, where we recognize that some of our regulations are actual barriers. We have nonprofits that are attempting to adjust. Habitat is a great example. They're not going to build 5-bedroom homes anymore. That's not something the market here is demanding. That small house was still able to be built. So I think that's a really critical point, and continuing to give us information on how we can actually do that, because even if small houses and duplexes might be popping up in Chapel Hill and Durham, we want to be respectful of the Chatham context and what that might look like here. There are also infrastructural demands that come with that. You're right. What is heating and cooling going to look like? We would hate to give someone a cheap house with a $500 utility bill. That completely defeats the purpose. We also want to make sure that we don't, for lack of a better word, scandalize it. That's really not the best word for it. But, we don't want to make it this trendy thing, completely disrespect, the opportunity that smaller homes could provide, and have those homes end up being $1,000 to $1,200 a month. So a lot of these ideas, I think we need to continue to hear, and I think are starting to be challenged by some of our nonprofit organizations. And I personally am really excited to see how they could come about. So I just thank you for that, because I think more of that needs to be shared.
Yes, I'd just like to respond when you were talking about the town of Pittsburgh and the tiny homes. We actually have approved pocket neighborhoods, which allows for smaller homes there, as well as accessory dwelling unit, which means basically that someone can have a small apartment above their home or above the garage. So we do actually have some things in place for that already. Now, in terms of the tiny homes, if someone does come to us and request that, of course, we will review that. But that is some type of alternatives also that we more than likely would be able to offer. But yes, right now we do have the pocket neighborhood.
I want to steer the question back to the panel just for a minute, a little bit more about policy. We've touched on some of these things, but really in any discussion of socioeconomic inequality, policies such as higher minimum wage, which we've touched on, government mandated health, child care, the expansion of Medicaid and higher taxes on the wealthy, those types of policies and subjects come up. Do any of these policies make sense to you as we're in this discussion, this thought process about this inequality? Anybody?
Stephanie, you have policy in your title. So.
I'm gonna punt it to you.
I was hoping if I stared at the end of the table, I'd become invisible. Didn't work. So I'm an honest person. I hope there's like 3 people in the room I've worked with, and I think they know that. My honest answer is yes and no, and I don't know, because I think these policies are wonderful in their concept and offer a lot of benefits, but and we need to think very carefully about them, and they haven't necessarily been broached yet. I think there are aspects, and I can only speak from my 1 year of being here, working where I work. There is a culture in the organization I work for that I think embodies a lot of the values those policies put forth, in terms of childcare, in terms of taking care of yourself, healthcare. We have some of the best healthcare of I think many organizations that hire people. So that's sort of the best answer I can give. But I think there is a responsibility if there were to be something like Medicaid expansion or kind of larger. Those are really state policies, right? So state policy analyst is not in my title. But I think at the larger level, if some of those things begin to happen, it is our responsibility to communicate how that impacts our community and what it looks like. Because again, it's not going to look the same for everyone. So I apologize for not the substantive answer you might have been looking for, but I think that's what I got.
I think yes, no, and I don't know covers it.
Any other thoughts?
I mean, I feel like those are issues that are impacted primarily at the federal and the state level, and it's really hard to figure out how to have an impact, I think, these days to make significant change at the federal level in particular and the state level. So it's easier in some ways to focus here locally and do what we can locally to take care of our own, because it's not coming from up here down and trickling down to the local governments. I think we have to find the solutions, at least for the time being, here as best we can, because it's not happening at the federal and state level in the way that I would hope it would, in terms of access to health care and income inequality, all those other issues you mentioned.
It sounds like things are moving in that direction, hearing from Karen and Pam, though. We're getting more progressive as we go.
Question?
Oh, I'm sorry. So people are chiming in from online. So I do have a comment from someone, if you guys don't mind me sharing. So someone commented regarding the habitat. They said that single-family homes that Habitat builds aren't enough, and not everyone needs or wants a single-family home. What about more public-private partnerships to build more multi-family homes?
I will speak to that. Yes. I think I am a big advocate for a variety of solutions. Habitat is our only builder in the county right now. That person who commented, and you can talk to Jerry Wharton himself, he'll tell you the same thing. 4 houses a year is not enough. It is unfair and not strategic whatsoever to have our entire 2,000 unit gap. I apologize, I do have numbers in my head, it's part of my job. 2,000 unit gap, it's not strategic and smart to put that entire gap burden on Habitat. And they can only offer their services to a portion of the people in need. And that's okay, that's absolutely fine. The public-private partnership is a best practice that is kind of sweeping the nation. That's exactly what needs to happen. Pittsboro and the county, and as well as Siler City, just in how they're beginning to kind of look at development around multifamily, are starting to have a lot of these conversations. So I'll start from the county and then move my way around. Chatham County started an affordable housing trust fund last year. It was started with a base amount of $200,000. I know several of you in the room, if you know anything about banking or development, you're like, $200,000. But we got out of $120,000 in an affordable donation of land, 44 units that will be developed in Siler City that are affordable. And I can also hear people saying, that's not enough, that's only 44. True. From there, we also have a proposed low-income tax credit development in Pittsboro by the post office. That's another 48. The numbers still haven't balanced out to if we'll have an application from the trust fund. But if we go off the same scale, there's a potential that another portion of that trust fund or a portion of whatever Pittsboro decides to assist the developer with, whether or not they do, these conversations are all happening, could go towards the development of that 48. That's another multifamily that's respectful of the way that I think our community looks. We're not at the point yet, I think, where we're looking at 300 unit apartments. Sometimes that's gargantuan, no matter where you are or where you're putting them. So absolutely. And public-private partnerships can look different. You know, Pittsboro's working on an ordinance around affordable housing that will have in its regulatory language kind of what flexibility there is for developers trying to build affordable housing. That's a public-private partnership. That's saying that we as a public entity are open for business for you to bring this community need here. The county is also looking at a location policy where we'd like to incentivize affordable housing development near healthcare, near your job centers as we get them, near schools, near transit stops that we have. And so that's another form of public-private partnership. So there's the subsidy, there's the elimination of regulatory barriers, and all of those can really help for multifamily. And I don't think that just from looking at, again, apologies for being a data nerd, from the data, we haven't had a lot of multifamily growth. And that finally has the opportunity to start coming back. And in the affordable realm, that public-private partnership is absolutely crucial. And so that's going to be, I think, a continued priority of everywhere in the county to support that.
Randy?
Yeah, I have a question building on what you just said. So currently in the county, until they change they're working on the UDO. I think Karen could speak to that as a commissioner, but the rules that I understand that if you're in the county and you wanted to build apartments, for instance, you're still operating under the situation. If I have 100 acres, I can build 100 units, and that's not going to help you get to a point where you could build apartments or townhouses that were affordable.
Right.
Where are you policy-wise in moving that along, especially in places that you could get that density to address the gap of 2,000 units? And then my other question is, this is really great data. Is it longitudinal and see where it compares to where we were, over a 20-year period or 10-year period? Are we getting worse?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So to the first point, and I don't know if Commissioner Howard knows any more, well, probably more than I do. So again, with the honesty, at the literal point that we're at is that we know we're going to do a UDO. We're going to do a UDO update. That acknowledges, I think, some of these barriers. Not only will our UDO acknowledge that, but our comp plan acknowledges that. And I think that's really important, although it might not feel like a big deal yet, because it means that there's recognition in our actual land use guiding document that where we are right now will not produce what we need. So I would say we're at the recognition and we got an update point. I don't know what that means for applications that will come in. I'm not trying to sign our planning department up for stuff, but I know them to be very understanding people, and so I'm not sure what that looks like from the planning side moving forward until we have a UDO in place. I think that would be something that would be great to ask them of what does that mean? What would a request look like as we recognize that our current regulations don't necessarily mean that we can do multifamily? What is the flexibility, if any? And so that's where planning policy kind of comes in line.
Question. The median household income is 44,560 West, right?
It's actually much lower.
So, okay, what's the data?
So I believe some of this data is taken from our awesome community assessment. And so I think that data might be from either the census or from that survey group, which is a wonderful study. From the data that I just know that the housing group uses, We're lumped into the Raleigh-Chapel Hill MSA, so according to that lumping together, we're well over 60,000. But when you dial down into specific areas, Pittsboro is around 53,000, and Siler City is around 29. Goldston is around 23.
Okay, so using what you just said.
Yes.
If you go to the budget and tax center data that they update every year,
Mhm.
North Carolina Justice Center, a livable wage in Chatham County is over $50,000 just to get the basic necessities.
Right.
So this figure is 10% below, and you're telling me that
It's even lower.
you probably have 70 or 80% of the people living below livable wages?
Yes, I am. And there's also what we call a housing wage. And I know it might seem like I'm shooting myself in the foot, but this is just a thing in the field. There's something called a housing wage, which is actually higher than the living wage, to actually ensure that someone can reasonably, comfortably, for them, afford an apartment. Is actually much higher. So you might see a living wage be around $15, but a housing wage in the county, in our county, and they do it by county level, is actually around 19.
Our living wage is $24 and like 52 cents for a mother with like a kid or two. You can see that table, so it's
Right.
significantly higher,
Right.
which is over 50, which means that
Different
most of our
data.
people are living below livable wages.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what that means on the development side is that we require even more subsidy, and that it's oftentimes really hard to get the rents that from the business side that the developers might need to make it work, which is a barrier to getting the development here in the first place, which then means even more subsidy and capital needs from a variety of sources. So it's an absolutely, it's crazy. Yeah.
I want to really quickly, we've said the term UDO a lot. That's for those of you that aren't functioning in land use planning and policy, that's a unified development ordinance. So our communities operate with ordinances, lighting ordinance, noise ordinance, watershed, land use, et cetera. So a unified development ordinance is an effort to take all of those different ordinances and combine them into a single document that works together. So a lot of times as we adopt one ordinance here and one ordinance there, over the course of 40 years, they can tend to conflict with each other. So a UDO, a Unified Development Ordinance, which Siler City has one, Goldston is completing its around now, I believe. Pittsboro is in the process of completing one, and Chatham County will begin the process this year. It has started the process. So it's a big undertaking for any municipality. It's very it's a great chance for everyone to weigh in. This was going back to something earlier. I think we can get creative with land use planning. We have very defined single family housing. We have very defined multifamily housing. In between there's not, that's where our creativity stops. So I think we can do a lot better in making neighborhoods hybrid. And so, so make things hybrid. I actually was at an event in Raleigh this morning, their annual economic development forum, and the speaker had this graph about over the past 40 years how our household sizes have gone down, but our housing sizes have gone up. So we actually are using twice the square footage per person than we were 40 years ago. So yeah, we have an affordable housing problem. We're using too much house, arguably.
Right. And those are those kind of, when I was saying that we need those smaller units, those multifamily houses that aren't in large apartment complexes. They're much more manageable size, and they can fit into existing neighborhoods because they're duplexes and triplexes and quadruplexes.
Right.
They're kind of going back to the way a lot of cities originally were built
blends
up.
together.
They blend together kind of naturally, and they provide sort of naturally occurring affordable housing.
Zach, you had a question? Okay.
So I'm a journalist, so I'm going to make this question as least complicated as possibly can. So the county's proposed budget for this year included a 4.19 cent tax increase, property tax rate increase. And that's with, the growth that's supposedly that's happening here. And what y'all are talking about, the ideas that y'all are talking about which are pretty good ideas, it's going to involve investment from the government, from private individuals. I guess, if talk about I think Susan, you talked about affordable housing bond, $10 million affordable housing bond. That's more money that the county's going to have to borrow if that's something they pursue. So I kind of want to hear from all of y'all, your different angles, your different perspectives. Why should Chatham County residents invest their money in that? Whether it's through being okay with a tax rate increase, property tax rate increase, or there's been discussion about a sales tax, quarter-cent sales tax being added, or through donating to nonprofits or through spending their own time. Why should people be investing their money, their time, the different kinds of capital y'all talked about in these efforts? Because it's not going to happen without that. It's not going to happen without those funds and that money. So why should people do that?
All right, I'm just going to take a different approach to it while still respecting your question, but I'm going to pivot. No, so in economic development, we work to bring new investment and jobs to Chatham County. We want to increase the commercial tax base. Right now, Chatham County has about 90% of its tax base based on residential tax revenue. There's an issue with that. Residential uses cost more money than what they bring in. So a cost of community services study shows that for $1 spent on residential, only about 87 cents comes back in revenue. Whereas for a commercial or an industrial, if you spend $1 in community services, you make about $3 in revenue. And agriculture is also profitable, a little less so than commercial and industrial. So what this means is we need to concentrate on expanding that tax base. So, I quoted we're about 90% residential agriculture. By comparison, Lee County, Wake County, Durham, they're anywhere between 20 to 40% non-residential in their tax base. In Chatham County, we have about 1% of our land that is used for commercial and industrial. So our commissioners adopted, I think I wanted to clarify, comp plan. That's another term that Stephanie and I live and breathe. It's the county's comprehensive land use plan, which is really defining where we want to see development, keeping our rural areas rural and preserved for agriculture, keeping that density low, and really concentrating the growth towards the municipalities that have the services and have the infrastructure and capacity for growth. So that's all to say, we have a defined plan where we want to put it. So we're really focusing on increasing that tax base and expanding those revenues so we have a better return on our investment. I didn't really answer the question is what he's telling me. I told you I wasn't, though.
I think that's actually a really good answer. I think, one thing, because it's true, I think you really do have to expand the tax base because the burden is on residential taxes. And there are a lot of people that are hurt by tax increases. I think we have to recognize that. There are some people who can clearly afford to pay more taxes in Chatham County, without a doubt. Some people move here because they want to avoid the taxes in Chapel Hill, for example. And they can afford to pay a little bit more in their property taxes. But there are clearly people here who can't, and that might mean them losing their home if taxes go up. So I think you have to take that into consideration. And if taxes go up to a point where people are going to be losing their homes, there has to be some kind of remediation or a fund. There has to be some way to address that. I don't know the answer to that, but I think there are legitimate concerns about tax increases for a lot of people. Not everybody, but a lot of people.
Is there an effort to freeze property tax levels for seniors and or people who have lived on that property their whole life, worked their whole life to pay that property off, and now face the possibility of being taxed off of that land. Is there an effort?
Hi, I'm Diane Hales, Chatham County Commissioner, and you were sitting right next to me. But you can homestead. That is one way if you meet income requirements that can provide a reduced tax. Other than that, is my understanding. Other than that, there is no other mechanism. If you are a farmer actively farming, you get a very reduced tax rate. It's called present use value. So your farmers are already, if they are in the program and are qualified for present use value, they are not paying a tax valuation on their land. They're paying a much reduced land value, which translates into less tax. So that exists, and that's state law, by the way. And there is the opportunity for it's called homestead exemption. I'm not sure if exemption is the right word, but it is homestead, and it does have, a tax office can tell you the very specific qualifications. Other than that, you pay the rate. You pay the rate based on the value. And the value of your property, we are starting a second revaluation. Our first one, by state law again, state law says you must do that every 8 years. Every 8 years you have to look at every single property, every parcel of land, and look at it at market rate. You have to hire a bunch of appraisers. It's expensive to do, but you go through this process and you say, this parcel over here is now worth X dollars. And that becomes the market level that the tax is based on. So my parcel may have been valued at $100,000 4 years ago or 8 years ago, and it now may be $20,000 more value. So I will pay tax on that increased value. So there is no, unfortunately, there is no mechanism to reduce taxes for a person who has less money versus the person who has lots of money. It's just, it has to be the same rate to every property owner based on the value of that property.
Can I try and answer your question? But I saw there's a question in the back, so if it's related to that, go ahead and ask it.
Well, it kind of is, but I've got about 6 things.
Woo, okay, cool. So why, right? Why should they support it? I think there are ways to support it outside of a tax increase, of bearing the burden on taxes wise. But if it comes down to spending their money, I would say if you truly care about your community, if you actually truly care about your neighbor having an option if they hit hard times, your child's teacher being able to live somewhere, or even someone who is just struggling, having options, or people who are not struggling, who just can't afford a $1,200 rent to have an option, then you will find that investment worthy. That's sort of my weird and mushy moral argument, because there's something to be said about the effects of not having your own home. It's incredibly destabilizing. It destabilizes everything in your life. It starts to, if you have unstable housing, it competes with everything. It messes with your health. It messes with your psychological ability to make healthy decisions and choices. And we don't want people to make healthy decisions and choices so that they can necessarily spend money, but so that they can be healthy residents alongside us and enjoy the county that everyone says they love so much. And if you love this county and then you want to actually help people and invest in people, then this is not something that is a threat. This is something that should be viewed as an asset. Are there growing pains along with it? Absolutely. I think oftentimes economic development and housing and community development can be pitted against each other. But luckily, I think Alyssa is really cool, and the work she does is extremely important. So it's
I think you're cool too.
Thanks. But it's a simultaneous effort. Now I'll give sort of the financial reasonings, right? So let's say that, you know, we're not completely reliant on our tax base. Perfect Chatham. We're not completely reliant on a residential tax base. We have affordable housing. Our gap, if not completely eradicated, which, woo, we could teach our neighbors something about that, because there's some pretty large gaps in affordable units around us. If not completely eradicated around us, is much smaller, and there is an increased number of community options for people to get help. From a financial perspective, people who are stable buy things. They make healthy decisions and choices. They participate in their community more. A civic perspective, they're engaged. If there's a problem, they have the emotional capacity to come and speak up. Not saying they don't right now, but if I'm worried about paying my rent, am I gonna come to a town meeting? No. I'm gonna go do what I need to do to make sure I have a roof over my head. And I know that I think it's a very valid point that has been made several times, that it's really easy to make kind of these broad statements, and not all of us maybe have been all over the county. That's absolutely true for myself, and I think that's the case. I think there are people in situations that I don't know of, but from personal experience, not having an option, not having a home is an extremely terrible thing. And it shines a poor light on your community. It shines a poor light on leaders, not only leaders, but on the people who have a role to play community-wise in terms of their investment and advocacy when they don't support people having a safe place to be.
I think Stephanie hit it out of the ballpark with that. But just to add to that, and we're going to pay in some way. So when people don't have a safe place to live, their options get thin, and we're going to pay through maybe increased healthcare costs, in addiction, in all different types of different ways. So in that sense, you know, there's we're going to stave off those types of payments for this one. And I think bottom line is what Stephanie was getting at. If you want a good community, then we all have to pay for that.
Okay, we're close to finish up. I just want to be respectful of the panelists' time. So if this can be our last question.
Yeah, it'll be very quick. So my first question is for any of you. Is there any conversations behind generational wealth and developing generational wealth? So we're talking about now, we need housing, we need this, but we're also looking at, hey, what about the next generation, Is that something that's going on at all with any of our programs in the county? I'll take that as a no. Number two.
Wait. That was pretty fast.
Well, he said he wants me to hurry. So.
Well, I mean, generational wealth is built through education, so let's just start there, right? So we have wonderful programs in the county that help our students go beyond a high school education to go into higher education. And some of those have been fantastic and great programs. I'm going to pick out the Scholars Latino Initiative as one of them. That's helped to send many, many students on to higher education. And that's one of the ways that you build generational wealth, is by increasing educational opportunities.
Right. So that's one way, but there's some other ways as well. And one thing, we were talking about taxes earlier. One of the things that people may not realize is if you make below a certain amount of money and you put $1,000 a year into a qualified retirement plan, the government will give you $2,000, a $2,000 tax credit. So in other words, you're basically making $1,000 by making that long-term investment. So that's one conversation. And what kind of other, current financial literacy, not for people who are good and going through school and who are going to college, but what kind of financial literacy is going on for those individuals who are making the lower wages, but thinking that, hey, maybe the lottery is my retirement plan, or maybe the lottery will help me. I mean, is there classes, is there things that are going on offered by whoever, the library or whoever, to educate people on, budgeting and things like that?
So the answer to that is yes. Also, and I'm gonna tip my county hat to like this right here, and partially speak from personal assistance. I would never give the government $1,000 of my money to get $2,000
No, you're
back.
not giving it to the government. You're putting it in a qualified retirement plan.
Right. But if I have immediate needs, right, that's not gonna cross my mind. You know what I'm saying? Like it's competing against additional things, and the thought of putting that money away, competing against other decisions that might just be a hard sell for certain situations. So I just wanted to.
Well,
put
okay,
that
so I'm
out
sorry.
for.
So I guess you misunderstood me. So what happens is
I did not misunderstand.
Yeah, what happens is when you put that $1,000 away,
Uh-huh.
the government then gives you a $2,000 credit.
At the end of the year, so I had to wait all that time to get $2,000 back.
Okay, well, but you can put the money in on April 15th and get it with anyway. Go ahead.
No, okay. Well, I'm just saying everybody's situation is different. Yes, there are financial literacy programs. The Telemon Corporation has been doing a lot of financial literacy. I think courses, and then Habitat through their program. And you said not in education or, not in a specific educational path or school program, but, home ownership programs do offer that component. I believe I met a young woman a few weeks ago, Operation Hope, out of Siler City. They also do financial literacy. Central Piedmont Community Action, folks participating in their programs, they're located in Siler City. They assist with financial literacy. The Salvation Army, I believe just part of their case management, they offer support in terms of financial literacy as well.
So the stuff is there. Are people utilizing it? I mean, is it?
I would say yes.
Okay,
Is it very well publicized? Probably not.
And that kind of leads me to the next question. That goes back to what Paul was saying earlier. So I have the ability to give $10,000 to the Chatham County schools through a program that teaches grief sensitivity. So when a student's parent dies, how to interact with that person. It's a $500 grant that I can give to every school. I've reached out to every single school in the county. Only 4 have taken advantage of it. This goes back to the question that was earlier. Chatham Charter was one of them. That's one of the white schools that we're talking about. Hall River Christian Academy is one of them, a private school. Pittsburgh Elementary did it because my son goes there. And Northwood did it because of the athletic, basically some athletic, the athletic director conversation. So my point is, I'm offering money to all these schools. Literally, I just have to meet with 5 instructors from that school. What other things are being offered to schools that maybe they're not accepting, Paul?
I don't know. I mean, how am I supposed to know
because
that?
we're making that conversation.
Here's the thing, though. I mean, I raised $65,000 to build a park for Siler City, free money.
Well, good on you.
Yeah, and it took like 5 years for them to say yes. I mean, that's part of dealing with government, I think, sometimes, right? Is that you have to deal with a bureaucracy that is going to say no and is accustomed to say no in many cases. So you have to push through that. I mean, my advice to you is to keep pushing, to make relationships and to find a way, because there can be a way.
Right.
Now, I say that because we were able to build that park, Paul Braxton soccer field, which is the only regulation-sized field in the county, at $65,000, gifted to the town of Siler City. We were able to build a soccer team at Jordan Matthews. Why? First response was no. And you got to keep pushing on some of that.
No, I understand, but I just wanted to make the point that, the opportunities are there. Are they taking advantage of it? And then you talked about government. So the last point is to the 2 commissioners here. What is the conversation behind changing the rules on the voting for districts? In other words, if I live in District 1, I should be voting for a county commissioner in District 1, not all the county commissioners in the entire county. That is something that needs to change, because what's happening is the Northeast, right, is basically voting for county commissioners across the board. So there is not representation in 3, 4, and 5.
Is that a question?
That's a question more for the county commissioners.
established a committee that was nonpartisan. Actually, it was representative of both parties and a nonpartisan contingent. And they came back with a recommendation that we maintain the policy that we have for the county voting now. And they found that it was not in the interest of any particular group. We looked at minority groups who arguably we could say Hispanics have never had a voice on our board. If you believe that in order to represent a group, you have to be a member of that group. But the results of that commission were that the best way to represent all of Chatham County was to maintain the system that we have now. And regardless of what the commissioners thought, we opted to go with what that committee brought. Personally, no. No. I think that you vote for your commissioners, and that means that when you vote, I become your commissioner whether you voted for me or not, whether you live in my district or not. I have the same responsibility to you that I have to people who voted for me. I don't find out whether people did or not. Once you become a commissioner, you just represent everyone.
Thanks for the question. Not really within the purview of what we're trying to do tonight, but I do appreciate the question. And I do want to be respectful of our panelists' time because they have, I know.
They haven't had
talking to
dinner.
some, they've had a very,
We
very
want the
busy
brownies.
week. So I just do want to wrap up and try to do this on a little bit of a positive note. And Stephanie, I'm going to start with you and kind of go this way. So just give us a takeaway. And one thing that maybe is a part of a question for this is, what do you say to somebody who says, is the American dream still alive in Chatham County? So think about that. What's one or two takeaways you'd have from tonight?
I don't feel qualified to say whether the status of the American dream in this county. I think I still have a lot of learning to do, so apologies for tabling that. But for the takeaways, I think from this session, again, I started with saying that I would like to learn. I think we re-emphasize the fact that there are needs everywhere that are unseen by people like me who are in institutions and are attempting to do outreach but may not see everything. That there are needs and that there are good ideas about how to address some of our problems, but also that we might not be hearing about a lot of the things that we are or are not doing, and so we need to do a better job communicating that. So those are kind of my main takeaways, but also that we are at a point at which we have the opportunity to create a lot of things here in Chatham County that may not be new for other places, but may be new for us. And I think, as the resident idealist in my office, that that is a really powerful position to be in. And so, yeah.
My takeaway is that this was very overwhelming, and there's a lot of worms in the cans. I think also the answer is in diversity, and that we need to surround ourselves with people that are not like us, and that is the answer. And I would love to see, like I said, like an asset map, and to have a group of people like in government and nonprofits and in private business get together and form something. And I think we actually have the solutions here. We just have to keep digging, and we need to keep listening to each other. And I really appreciated the woman talking about the heat and the food situation. So, and thanks for coming tonight, y'all.
Yeah, I agree with what Tammy and Stephanie said, and I really appreciated what Commissioner Howard said about the divide in the county, and there needs to be a way to address that on a human, person-to-person level, and we all need to do a better job of reaching out to one another. And is there a way that we can creatively come up with some ideas to make that happen so that we do interact more? I went to the Chicken Festival in Siler City, and what an incredible group. I mean, it was so incredibly diverse, and I don't know how many people came from Pittsburgh, but it seemed sort of countywide. But there have to be more things like that where we can bring people together. And I love the idea that the gentleman in the back talked about photography and making things, letting people know what life is like in other parts of the county by telling stories. I think there's some just really great creative ideas that this county is so incredibly creative that we'll come up with some ideas to help bridge that gap. I hope we move forward from this conversation.
Well, I think anytime we have a discussion and talk and share, that's always beneficial. The American dream, I think, exists for some, but not for all. But I think that's true for the country as well as the county.
Yeah, I would completely agree with everything that's been said. I'd say don't be part of perpetuating the divide. Again, we've touched on this. Communicate, participate, engage. It'll go a long way. You're all here tonight for a reason. You're engaged. We can do it more broadly and work together. I appreciate everyone sticking around for this because I know it's been a long evening, but I think going forward we can, I'd say work together. We think on a county level, but on a regional level, the issues that we're having, we're not alone. Someone else has had them. Someone else is coming up with solutions. We can learn from each other and implement the best practices that work for us, either on a town level, a county level, a regional level. So thank you to the students or graduates, right, who put this together, and the Chatham News and Record.
All right, let's thank our panelists. Right. Okay, a couple of housekeeping things before we leave. The library is closed, so you're going to have to, unfortunately, exit through this door. I want to thank you again for being here and staying with us throughout the night. This is the first One Chatham event. We hope to have more of these community conversations, maybe once a quarter. And so any input you have, please reach out to myself. My email address is on page 2 of the paper each week, and you can get a hold of FERC through me as well. So thank you again for coming. Feel free to take some food with you as you leave, and have a great night.
Testing. So there we go, folks. Here we are. This is our evening here in Chatham County. And I hope you can see me just fine on the thing, on the video. All right. So, thank you all for tuning in this evening. My apologies for the sound issue. It was an equipment malfunction. So we're here for the end of the Chatham Divided, and let's hope with this conversation we're less divided. And in your community, if you have issues, take the time to sit down, have a conversation, talk to one another. As always, I wish you peace, love, power every minute, every hour. May the Most High bless you, keep you. My name's Aaron. This is ToshTalk.com, where we discuss, we define, and we deliver. I'm all out of time. I'll see you when I see you. Peace.